have everything on the ground, ready to go. You've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got that which you just saw on the screen in terms of the status messages, you've got the crisis mapping community, and you've got the UN. And you can expect that this conglomeration, this coalition of actors to be present on the ground from the get-go in almost any natural disaster. I think that's a given. So in Japan we saw this particularly Google crisis response, and the plethora of other actors, Yahoo, NHK, the plethora of NGOs, and even the Japanese Prime Minister who started his English tweets, I think, a day after the tsunami and the earthquake hit. But there was a very interesting article in The Economist, I think about 2 days ago. It's a very long one about the Japanese earthquake and the information response, looking particularly at Google crisis response. And there was a quote by what was attributed to an elder Japanese man, so older person, and he said that his primary source of information was not anything remotely of what we are speaking about today, or is included in the disaster 2.0 report. It was just the plain old radio. And I wonder whether that's also a pertinent observation that anchors us to realities on the ground that we might otherwise not regard in our ardent advocacy of ICTs. In this regard, I think the ICT for Peace Foundation has worked since 2008 with the Office of Information Communications Technology and Dr. Sun Hong Che to bring some sort of coherence into what at the time and still is a great challenge, to bring all of these actors together to coordinate and collaborate their information. The crisis information management strategy was tabled at the General Assembly. It's a strategy that's ongoing. It has OCHA, DPKO, DFS, and a number of other UN agencies, and essentially it tries to bring in what's called the common operational data sets, what you need to know about a country when a disaster occurs, so that you're better prepared to deal with it, and the crisis mapping community to work together with the UN a bit more coherently. I think when I look back at my work with the foundation, we responded to Nargis in Myanmar in 2007, and if you take a look at Haiti, and you take a look at Japan, things have moved forward. And I think that's undeniable, and the report is a reflection of that. What I would like to spend maybe 3 minutes on is perhaps playing our jeu provocateur, which I told Nigel I'm quite good at doing, and leave you with a set of questions, as the ambassador also encouraged us to do. And I think there are several challenges. I think that we tend to sometimes ignore and gloss over when we are euphoric in our embracing these new technologies. One is that which first two speakers have spoken about, information overload. I think there are so many streams of information today coming at us, wherever we are and whoever we are, whether we are a national NGO or an international NGO, that it's very difficult to make sense out of the information. Knowledge and information are two different things, and wisdom is quite something else. So I think that there is a conflation between all three of them. There are enduring concerns, and for those of you in the crisis mapping community, but also perhaps like Nigel in the UN, which is at the cutting edge of using information networks, there is still quite emotional debate over proprietary ownership, data standards, who gets to use what, when, how, and data lock-in. And these are complex debates, these are highly emotional debates, so things are moving forward, but people are still very territorial about the data they produce, and rather territorial again about how private entities, like Microsoft and Google, for example, sometimes take this data and then don't allow its use by the large community. There's also, I mean, I come from a country that has seen its fair share of difficulties, not just from the tsunami either, and I think I'm very interested in this question of accountability. There is a chorus of entities and people ready to take center stage and the spotlight when things are going good and when something good has happened. There is almost little or none to take the responsibility when technology fails. And there are lives at risk here. And the issue of accountability, I think, is one that we need to address. Nigel has also pointed out to the sustainability aspects. What happens to these communities when our cutting-edge tech is taken out because our mission ends, or when it's actually given to the community and they have scarce resources to actually maintain that over the long term. So there are issues of cost, culture, sustainability, and knowledge transfer that I think are interesting questions to ask. What I also find is quite interesting is that, for example, not want to name names here, but Google Crisis Response is better able to respond and set up a structure to deal with a natural crisis rather than political one. And I wonder why that is. And I think there are answers to that, but it's interesting to also go into those answers. I haven't seen, for example, a Google crisis response to Syria, Libya, or Egypt. So I think mapping political violence is also a challenge. I think that when you're talking about the crisis mapping community, you often tend to gloss over context, who is actually producing this information, for whom, in what language, and then you run into problems of analysis. There are technological tools available like Ushahedi's wonderful Swift River technology platform. But I wonder, a very simple question, have you thought about going back to Haiti and the data that was produced on Twitter or Facebook? I challenge any one of you to get me the tweets that were produced in January of the month that the earthquake occurred. And that's, I think, a very difficult task to do. And so data does disappear, and archiving it is also a challenge in terms of digital archiving as well. We saw with Pakistan and the flooding that the community of response that was there for other disasters wasn't there for Pakistan in much the same enthusiasm and volume. So again, there seems to be differences in the manner in which we respond to different crises. I also come from trauma. I have faced my own trauma, and I come from a country that is largely traumatized as well. And when you're talking about trauma and a traumatized community, particularly coming out of conflict, it invariably affects the production of information. Its consumption, its perception, its storage, its archival, and its dissemination. It invariably colors it. And I think that we need to kind of problematize the manner in which that also affects the work that we do. And finally, my final point is something that I think is the most difficult, but I suppose the most rewarding. It's difficult because it's not celebrated. It's the celebration of failure. We talk about our successes, but we are less open about our failure. There are reasons for that. Even in this room, if we were to talk about failure, there would be people who would blackmark us. There would be donors who would not give us money. There would be other UN agencies who would laugh at us. There might be the good ambassador who will earmark that and say that the next time a project comes to his desk, that the failure is reason enough to actually not give them the initiative to go ahead. So failure is actually a black mark in this community of practice. But I think we need to be open about it, because we can learn from failure. And there's a concept, I think it's an American phrase, that I was introduced to a couple of years ago. It's called failing forward. It's been open about your failure. I have failed miserably in attempting to hold government accountable for its human rights abuses. I paid the price as well. But one learns from that. And I think that the greater sharing of failure might help us articulate the challenges and the questions of this excellent report as we move forward in the process of learning from all of our experiences. Thanks very much.